Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. This is a super important topic. All topics for CE are important, but this one is one that's very near and dear to my heart, realtor safety. We're going to spend 2 hours together this afternoon talking about realtor safety. And for some of you, these are going to be good review points, maybe pick up some new tips and tricks. For some of you, this may be the first time you're being exposed to this kind of content. So please don't be scared by it, but we are going to talk about some real life scenarios here. So we will take a break about halfway through. It may not be exactly halfway through, but about halfway through. So if you need to use the restroom, refill your coffee, whatever, you can just plan on us having a break about halfway through. Otherwise, all the things that Danielle said applies. And there are lots of staff here monitoring us to make sure we all follow the rules. So I'm sure that's not going to be a concern this afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my program so that you guys can see my screen. So as always, if you want the slides from this program, I am happy to send them to you. My email address is right here at the bottom of this slide. I have it at the end as well. If you haven't made your mind up, if you want them or not, you can wait and decide later. All you have to do is shoot me an email. Just put safety class, safety slides, whatever in the subject line. I'm teaching a few times this week and I want to get you the right program, but you can take these back to your offices, keep it for your reference, use it for training, whatever. It's very important to me that we get the word out there and have these conversations as realtors so that we can protect ourselves, protect our realtor family. So just like I said, this program is not meant to be scary. We just got through Halloween. I'm a person that hates to be scared, but I'm also a realist. And I've got lots of things to share with you this afternoon that also are going to come from real life experiences. Those of you that don't know me, I'm an associate broker in St. Lawrence County in upstate New York. So if you were on earlier, we were having a snow conversation. We got snow here yesterday. You guys did too. Ours stuck around a little bit longer. It was gone this morning, thankfully. So I'm in upstate New York. I'm an associate broker. I practice real estate just like all of you. I showed property this morning. So I'm in the business and in the thick of it, just like probably all of you are as well. And so I'm going to share some stories with you, some experiences with you, so that hopefully none of you ever have anything close to what I've experienced. But if you do, some of this training may kick in for you and help you along the way. So what we're going to talk about here today are real life scenarios that we run into in real estate. The reality of our job, if you sit down and think about it, is we meet strangers on a daily basis, usually in an enclosed, confined space, a property, and we've never been to that place before. We've maybe never met the person we're meeting before. And as I'm going to talk with you guys about today, your client may not necessarily be the threat. And when I first got into real estate, did my first realtor safety trainings, all we talked about was buyers. Buyers are the threat. Buyers are going to harm us. Buyers are going to kill us. That's possible. But I want to expand your thinking that it may not be your consumer, your client at all. It may be someone else in the environment, in the situation. And we're going to talk about that and how to avoid those situations. Okay, sound good? Everybody with me? So what I want you to do now, I love to start every class with an expectations conversation. What I want you to do is either unmute yourself or put it in the chat. What caused you to sign up and take today's class? And what do you want to get out of today? What's your goal? So you guys take a moment and do that. Like I said, either pop it in the chat or just unmute yourself. I'm fine with that too.
Well, I've had way too many situations lately. And, I in my own mind, I know what I'm doing to try and protect myself. But a couple of them are really made me think. Made me think. One in particular, I went to show an empty house. I usually get there first, look around the house on the outside, then go in, lock the door, and look around the house on the inside. The houses were usually empty. Mm-hmm. And it turns out as I go up, unlock the door, go up the stairs, I hear somebody in there. It's supposed to be an empty house. And further walking up the stairs slowly, I hear a guy and I say, "Is there someone there?" And I thought at first that it was another agent showing the property, but I unlocked the door.
Right.
So he comes out and he's at the top of the stairs. He has his pants on, but no shirt. And I said, "Who are you?" And he said, "Well, I'm staying here." And I said, "This house is empty. And the sign outside says that, it's for sale." And
Mm-hmm.
he said, "Well, I paid a friend of mine $200 and he let me stay here. I tried to call the seller agent, but what he said to me, I'm backing down the stairs and back out the door, and I'm on the ground. I'm trying to call the seller's agent, and there's no answer. He's not responding. He's not responding." And so at that point, I said to the guy, I said, "Well, this house is for sale." So I got the key out of this box. Did you know that any agent that has a key on their phone can get the key out of this box? And he said, "Well, yeah, if you'd come earlier, you'd have found me naked." I
Oh,
didn't respond. I just said, "We're not going to see this house today." And then when the client gets there, I'm talking to the guy. He's standing on the banister hooking illegal cable.
oh,
And
yes.
so I said, so he had been there for a while.
Sure.
And so I said, "Well, we're not going to see this house today. I don't know who he is. He shouldn't be there." And at this point, I am putting his license plate number in my phone just in
Mhm.
case something was going to happen.
Sure.
And that was that was really not totally unnerving because I was talking to him and it didn't feel like it was going to escalate as long as I stayed a distance and
Mhm.
close enough to my car. But then there was one I saw just recently where I went in, and the first night I got there, uh, the buyer came late and it was getting dark. I don't like to do showings at night. I don't. We get there, the power's not on. So they came much later than the appointment itself, even though I said to him that I don't do late appointments.
Sure.
And I couldn't get the door open. It turns out the door, oh, what's going on there?
I can hear you, but you
Uh,
froze.
okay, yeah, a call just covered my phone and I can't get rid of it until it hangs up, but it will. Remind me later when I leave.
There you go. I got you now.
Okay, um, so then I'm trying to open the door because he said, "Well, the light came on the garage. It was dark enough that the light came on the
Mm-hmm.
garage for overnight." And so I said, "Okay, well, wasn't anybody else really out there, so if something was going to happen,
Sure.
it would have happened."
Mhm.
And so I'm trying to get the door open. The door wouldn't open. So then I said, "Well, my key's not working, so we'll have to see it tomorrow morning." So we went back the next morning, and turns out the door wasn't locked. It was jammed.
Oh,
And so I forced it to where it did open. We go in and we look around, and he goes out on the porch. We had already all gone out on the porch. It was his wife, himself, and me.
sure.
We had gone out on the porch, looked around, but then they separated. She went upstairs. He went back out on the porch. And then he said to me, "Let me show you something." And I said, "What?" I go and I look and I see there is a pile of stuff with a gun on it.
Oh my.
And I said, "Well, we're going to leave now. We're
Mhm.
not,
We're
we
out of
don't
here.
see that. You don't see that." So they get out of the house and I come back in and I look just to make sure that we're leaving. It's still there.
Mhm. Of
And so we leave and I was just unnerved because we had been walking all around the house
course.
after the first time the porch was the first place we went.
Sure.
And then we come back and we're walking around the house and he saw it, but I didn't.
Mhm.
I didn't. We're going down in the basement. The basement didn't have any lighting. So I'm going down after them and they're just walking around there in the dark. So I put the light on my phone and
Mhm.
I'm, moving about trying to find a light switch. The whole thing was just so over the top.
Yeah. And those
I
are
said,
the
I
types of
couldn't,
situations we find ourselves in
yeah,
all
I
the
said, I couldn't
time.
believe I put myself in such a crazy situation and I'm in the basement, a dark basement.
Mm-hmm.
And so we finally do leave and I was able to call the seller's agent and let her know. And at that point I was just beside myself because I was in the house moving about. He saw it when we came in the house. So even as we were going upstairs, moving all around, come back down to the basement, and then he says, "Let me show you something."
Oh, crazy, crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing those stories. And I want to hear more from you and from the others as we're kind of moving through, as we're talking about things, if you think about things. In the chat, I see never a bad idea to learn more. Agree with that. Learn better practices. We're going to do that today for sure. It's been a while since my last safety class, so it's always good to refresh, always good to keep this top of mind, learn some more safety tips. Be leery of meeting unknown people and unknown properties, and being more aware of your surroundings. We're going to talk a lot about that today. I've had situations that gave me pause or felt like something was off, felt like I would like to learn more for myself and others. Great. I want you guys to share this information with your fellow realtors, your realtor family, so we can help keep each other safe. Often vulnerable in situations, have a plan. If you're working with investors, doing a lot of video calls, showing solos, vacant houses, and the Angela in the chat has gone into vacant houses and there have been squatters, and I've experienced that as well. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Sounds like Sarah, you had it too. So we're going to cover all those things this afternoon. So at the end of the day, I'm not your broker. I'm going to share with you all of my best practices, all of my tips and tricks. If you are not a broker, take this back to your brokerages, share it with your broker. And if you don't have office safety policies, then please encourage your broker or your manager to implement them. In my office, at every office meeting, we talk about safety all year round, talk about safety tips. We have group chat. Something comes up, and we'll share that kind of as we go through a little bit today, just kind of some different things that give you pause and make you feel like something's off. So one thing that is super important when we talk about realtor safety is having situational awareness. And if you know anything about personal safety, self-defense, this is the one thing that instructors are going to say over and over and over again. It is being aware of your surroundings, knowing what's going on around you, always keeping your head up, always keeping your eyes open, and having a good sense of what's around you. And if you have ever shown a property to a police officer or someone in law enforcement, sometimes even military folks, you may notice that if your practice is to stand behind them, that's my practice, they're going to try and stand behind you. They're not trying to be difficult in most situations, but that's their training. They're literally trained to never let someone get behind them for that reason. So I always find it a little humorous when I'm working with someone in the law enforcement field, because we're kind of at a battle for who's going to be behind who when we're walking places and doing things. So being aware of your surroundings at all times is a huge, huge part of what you can do to protect yourself and keep your head up. Because if someone has an intention to hurt you, so if now we're talking about a buyer or a seller, someone who has lured you into a situation and they have an intention to hurt you, they have a plan. Statistically speaking, a criminal in a criminal mind has a plan. And if you can do something to interrupt that plan, then 9 times out of 10, you're going to be able to stop that crime, stop that criminal from harming you. So being aware of your situation. I love what you said, Sarah, about go in, lock the door behind you. That's something that I do as well. I want to direct where the entry point is going to be. Now, there's different schools of thought. If you had to get out in a hurry and all the doors are locked, that could work against you. But if you pull into a property, there's no cars in the driveway, announce yourself loudly, realtor here for a showing, and you don't hear anything and my buyers aren't there yet, I'm going to lock the door behind me. And then I'm going to go through the whole property just to familiarize myself with the property, even if it's my listing or even if I've shown it before. And I'll tell you guys why that's important a little later on. Okay. Reading someone's body language is another really important part of situational awareness. So you've arrived at the property, you've surveyed the landscape, you get the lay of the land, you know kind of where things are and what to expect. And then your folks show up and you get a feel for their body language. Okay. And these are just some standard body language things that come up. Someone with pupils, that their pupils are dilated, their eyes are looking other places than the property. When you're there, to show a property to a buyer, they should be looking at the property, maybe looking around the area to see what the yard is like, or, the street. But if they're fixated on you, that can be a sign, a red flag, something may be amiss. Shoulders back, hands in the pockets, or clenched fists are also always signs of a potential issue. Again, some people just tend to walk more, with their hands in their pockets. Like law enforcement officers hate that. I'm less inclined to be afraid of that. I'm more looking at their posture. How are they paying attention? Are they looking for exits? Are they trying all the doors to see what's locked and what's not? Or, are they looking in the kitchen at the cabinets and that kind of thing? Another potential red flag in body language is their feet planted, they're not moving, they're not walking around the property. Again, fixated solely on you. You can tell the difference. Some of this stuff you just have to feel. And I know that makes it hard, but if you think of situations that you've been in where you're like, oh, this just doesn't feel right. Any of you that have worked with buyers for any length of time know what an interested buyer in a property looks like. If you see anything other than that, that can be a potential red flag. Same thing with your sellers. And I'm really big on buyers are not the enemy and buyers are not the only threat. If I were a criminal pretending to be a seller that wanted to sell my property, a realtor is the perfect target because we're going to run to that listing every day of the week. And so you get to the house or you get to the property and the seller is not showing you around, they're not talking to you about the property, they're not excited for you to be there to talk about the process, whatever, that's another potential red flag to look for. Again, we know, trust your gut. That's another big part of realtor safety, is just trusting your gut. So this part, I don't know how important it is for you guys. In my area, meth labs are very common. Do you have a lot of meth labs popping up around your market areas where you're selling properties? I'm seeing heads shake. No. Anybody
That I
say?
come across, no.
Not that you've come across, nobody. Like in my area, this is a really big thing. And it can be very hazardous to your health to enter a property like that. And what we find typically is it's not the seller, it's when it's a tenant in the property, because theoretically, if someone's not going to have a meth lab in their house and then call you to come list it. It's when there's a tenant there that the tenant is doing something they shouldn't be doing. So these are just a few things to look for or to make note of. If you have an immense amount of paint, I'm not talking one jar, I'm talking 150, containers of paint thinner, fuel smells, hospital smell. Actually, the smell like cat urine is actually the byproduct of meth. So having, a strong odor, anything at all that is out of the ordinary or just a major turnoff, my resolution is to get myself out of there, get my buyers out of there as quickly as possible. And it doesn't sound like these are super prevalent in your area, so maybe just save this for your reference, but these are all substances used or maybe found. I once showed a property, it was a foreclosure, and there was probably 200 camping propane tanks. So these people either really loved to go camping or they were doing illegal things at the property. So just keep in mind, look for things that are out of the ordinary. And, no sale is ever worth your safety or your health. Get yourself out of there, if you feel like something is amiss. So let's talk about some best practices when you're working with buyers. As I mentioned early on in my career, I was really taught that buyers are our concern, our threat. So here's our first arrive early. Okay. Sarah mentioned that in her story. She usually gets there early. I do too. Whenever my schedule allows, I get to the property early, even if I know my buyers, just so I can get the lay of the land, get that situational awareness, right out of the way so that I'm comfortable with what I'm showing. And if you're in an unfamiliar area, somewhere you're not used to being, especially if it's a rural property, look for ways out. Is the driveway the only way in and out? Is there a fence around? If I had to drive on the lawn, could I do that? Am I going to park my car in a way so that I could get out? If you can park on the street, that's preferable to me because it's an easy out if I had to get away. But if you can't do that because the surroundings don't allow for it or it doesn't make sense, I'm not going to walk up a huge 100-foot driveway, park your car, back in so that if you had to hop in your car, you could always hop right out. I always keep my keys easily accessible. So whatever that feels comfortable to you, whether that's leaving them in the car, whether that's putting them in your pocket, so that you could easily, again, hop in your vehicle and get out if you needed to. Again, there's different schools of thought. If you're going to leave them in the car and someone wants to harm you, are they going to hop in the car and take it? Probably not if that's not their plan, right? Remember, statistically, criminals come up with a plan ahead of time. And if you can do something to interrupt that plan, and we'll talk about that together, then you're going to put yourself in the best position possible. So for me, I have a keyless car, meaning I don't have to put the key in the ignition. I just keep them in my pocket, and then I'm ready to go if something were to pop up, something were to occur. I always go through whenever possible and turn all the lights on and unlock just one door, watch for my buyers coming in so that I can meet them, at that door so that they get in that way. That way I'm controlling the narrative, I'm controlling the situation, and I've walked through the property with my cell phone in hand, ready to call for help if I needed to, just to make sure that everything is on the up and up. And I'm going to share with you guys another tool that I use in all my showings, but I will give you a little preview here. It's this flashlight, and it just looks like a normal flashlight. It's great for dark basements, but it has a special feature. And as you can see, it doesn't look like it's any type of a weapon. So my buyers don't think that I'm going to harm them, right? But it helps me protect myself. I'll show you that when we get to the safety tools portion a little bit with us. Someone in the chat says, keep keys with us and can use the find your car on key fob to make a loud noise if you feel threatened. That's a fantastic point. And the other thing I'll tell you about that panic button, everybody has the panic button on your car, right? Mm-hmm. Do you know how long, if you push that without turning it off, do you know how long it will go for? No. It will go forever until your car battery dies. So if you're in a situation where you feel threatened, you can push that button. I always kind of say with a light heart, and I have a little bit of sarcasm, they'll at least find my car because it's going to make that really loud noise. So pressing that, again, anything to interrupt someone's plan to harm you is another way to disarm them and protect yourself. One of my favorite tools in my situational awareness safety toolbox is meet your clients outside and do the exterior first. And I know that buyers are super excited to get into the inside of the house, but they're going to have to look at the outside. Let's do that first. That way I can kind of survey the situation, watch their body language. Are they asking, appropriate buyer-like questions? What's their eye fixation like? What's their walking pattern like? And then everybody can just kind of feel comfortable in the situation before we go into an enclosed space. Okay. So start outside, walk, and you control the narrative. So meet your clients outside, introduce yourself. Nice to meet you. Hey, we're just going to take a walk around the outside and get started. A couple things I want to point out to you here at the property, because remember, you've arrived early and you've already walked around. This is something they're going to have to do anyway. Start that first whenever possible. Is it going to work in every situation? No, but whenever possible, start that outside first. Make sense? Okay. Schedule showings during the daylight hours. I love, Sarah, that you said that you do not do evening showings. I don't do evening showings either. And it stinks right now this time of year because our days are getting shorter before they're going to get longer again. And that limits the amount of time that I have to show property. And the market is tight and we're trying to I understand all of that. But me personally, my business practice is not to show properties when it is dark. Number one, the buyer can't make an informed decision about what they're buying. It's dark. Number two, it's not worth the stress and anxiety that it's going to cause me to not be able to do my assessments and, plan my situational awareness when I get there, because my consumer, my buyer may not be the only threat. There may be a neighbor, there may be a squatter, there may be a bunch of other things going on that I'm not able to identify. So whenever possible, schedule daylight showings. And again, I realize it's very tough to do that this time of year, but strongly encourage you to do your best. We talked about this a little bit already. Stay behind your clients, especially on the stairs. Does anybody know why that's important? Why you would want to be behind them, especially when you're dealing with stairs?
Yeah, so they don't push you down the stairs.
So they don't push you down the stairs, right? If they're trying to subdue you, if they're trying to harm you, then, a great way to do that is to give somebody a good shove when they're going down the stairs. So again, I always try to stand behind people whenever possible. It's our instinct as a realtor to be first. And as a strong, independent woman, which I consider myself, I always want to be like leading the charge to that basement. I'm not afraid of anything. Let me down there. The problem with that is I don't want to put myself in a vulnerable situation. So stand behind your clients, whatever you turn the light on and say, I'm right behind you. Let's head on down the stairs. And, again, I have my flashlight. So I've got that ready and handy to help them. I don't hand that over to them. And that puts me in the best position to be the least vulnerable to my clients. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. This sounds like a no-brainer, but keeping your vehicle with gas in it is very important, especially in the winter months. You don't want to find yourself stranded. You guys don't have this as much as I do, but we have areas that still don't have cell phone coverage. So I don't want to find myself in a vulnerable position, with no gas in my vehicle. So keep your vehicle as full of fuel as possible. If you have an electric vehicle, keep it as charged as possible when you have a full day of appointments or a half day of appointments. Don't get into that bad habit of letting it get down there, because if you have to make a run for it or in an emergency situation, you don't want to be stuck somewhere. Okay. Keep in mind, as I've said multiple times, your client may not be the threat. It may be a neighbor, it may be a squatter, it may be, someone a family member who shows up, doesn't want the property sold. I deal with that with estates all the time. It's an estate property, the executor puts it on the market, but one of the family members doesn't want it to sell. So now, they're dropping by to the open house or to whatever to try and sabotage the sale. And the thing about especially neighbors and squatters is you never know what someone's going to do when they're cornered, right? So in Sarah's example, and I've had cases where I've shown up, the house is supposed to be empty. I knock on the door, realtor here for the showing. I go in and I found people in bed. I found people in the shower. I found people doing things they shouldn't be doing. And you never know what someone is going to do when they feel threatened. And the best thing that you can do is get your clients out of there, put as much distance as possible, contact the listing agent if it's not your listing. Sometimes even if it is your listing, contact the seller and the authorities so that they can deal with whatever issue is going on. I've had situations where the neighbor was completely absurd and we were trying to do a home inspection, and then the neighbor is making and screaming racial slurs from his front porch across the street, to this property. And we called the authorities. It was my listing. It's absolutely unexplainable. I can't even imagine what would possess someone to do something like that, but we're not going to put ourselves in an unsafe situation. Cheryl says, I've had the seller not know about the showing too. That's the other thing to keep in mind, that you may catch people off guard. If there are two sellers and the listing agent told one and it didn't get communicated, whatever, you never know what someone's going to do when they're surprised or they're cornered. So the person that may harm you may not necessarily be your buyer. And the reason I tell you that is I find that I know this afternoon I've got a showing with buyers, and I've known these buyers for years. I sold them their last house. I'm not concerned about my safety with these buyers, but that doesn't mean that I can show up to the appointment, and just let all of my training go. I still have to have my guard up. I still have to pay attention to situational awareness because I don't know what I may be walking into. Make sense?
Mhm.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about safety tools. So we've got some tips and tricks under our belts for buyers. What tools can we use? Well, one that I love is my Apple Watch. You guys may already have this device. If you do, certain versions, mine in particular, has fall detection. So my buyer or my seller may not be the threat. Maybe I'm just a klutz. And before they get there, I fall down the basement stairs trying to go down and turn the light on. Well, thankfully, my Apple Watch has fall detection. And if you've never had to activate that, what happens is a notification comes up on your watch that says we've detected a fall. Did you fall? And it starts counting down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you can say yes or no. If it's yes, are you injured? Do you need help? Yes or no. If you don't answer, it will automatically start dialing folks in your contacts, and or you can set it to just straight dial 911. And I am not too proud to admit that my Apple Watch has detected a fall more than once. Thankfully, I was able to respond to say, yes, I fell, and no, I don't need help. I'm just a fool. I'm okay. But a tool like that could be very useful if you're at a property, doing a video tour by yourself and you fall down the stairs, who's going to come and find me? I need people to know where I am. So if you have an Apple Watch, look into that feature. There's other wearable devices that will do that as well. Some other tools that I love. So I'm going to stop my screen share so you guys can see it the best. Okay. Is this flashlight that I showed you. Okay. So when you push this button right here, it's going to turn on the light, and that's night vision. Super, super handy if you're showing a property in the dark. You tap it again and it's a regular flashlight. Tap it again and it's super bright. Okay. That's all very handy. But when you slide this button up and you push this green button right here, the taser. Okay. You have to make contact with the person that you are trying to shock. It doesn't have any little probes that shoot out, but even just the noise enough is, usually enough to deter someone to get someone away. And what I like about it is it's discreet. It's not a gun with things that are going to shoot out that I have to try and hide in my pocket so my buyer doesn't think that I'm paranoid. It's a flashlight. But if I feel like I'm in danger, with one hand, I can slide this up and I can squeeze this green. And now I can deter someone from getting close to me or make myself feel a little more safe. So these are completely legal. In my area, we have a store that sells them. You can buy them online. You probably have a store in your area. If you go to any gun shop or personal safety store, you can also just buy them on Amazon. I think this was like $100. Okay, well worth it. It has a USB charger, so I can charge it from my phone. And as long as this button is slid back, I can push the green button all day long and nothing happens. So I don't have to worry about accidentally shocking myself, which is very possible and could happen. So
Yeah.
another one of, yes, go ahead, Richard.
Is there a brand name for that if I wanted to order it
Yes.
from
So this
Amazon?
one is the Taser Strike Light 2. I'm going to put that in the chat for you guys. Okay. And it comes in white if you want a different color. It's a great flashlight too, super bright. And I love the night vision portion. So if you start the showing during the day and it ends up, or you start in the afternoon, it ends up getting darker and you are there longer, it does have that night vision as well. So I'm going to put this there, Strike Light 2. Okay, I love that one. I also have this little guy. This looks like a car key fob, right? Very discreet. I can hide it in my pocket. This has a little tiny flashlight on it as well, not as bright as my other guy, but it also has a little shocker. So if I needed something more discreet or, didn't want to carry around the big guy, this guy has a little shocker as well. And the thing about it is, just statistically, folks hate the sound of electricity, right? Nobody we're on Zoom and some of you jumped. Nobody likes that sound. So if you can do something to interrupt, again, you have to touch them to have this have an impact, but the sound enough is sometimes a deterrent. So it's just a little car fob like that. It has a little switch on the bottom. So again, I can shut it off and I can push this button and I'm not going to shock myself. Okay. So this one is called a Streetwise personal security device. Put that in the chat for you. And I think this was like $40. Okay. The next thing I have to show you does not have electricity. It does not shock you, but it makes a really loud sound. So if you're like, oh, I don't know, Brittany, I would probably shock myself. I can't do the shockers. This little guy also looks like a car key fob, very discreet. But when you pull this pin right here, it makes a super, super loud piercing noise. Okay. I'm not going to pull it because it will hurt your ears. But the idea is you pull the pin and throw the pin. Okay. Again, something to interrupt their thought process, something to stop them. And I will, if you want the information on this one, this has a little flashlight on it too. If you want the information on this one, shoot me an email. It doesn't have a brand on it, but I have the receipt. I can show you that. So those are my top 3 favorite personal safety tools. I have 2 more things to show you guys in that realm. The first one is the Alpha Home device. So it's very small, okay? And all you have to do, if you feel like you're not in a good place, is twist it. And you see how it activated? It's blinking now. This works with an app on your phone for no monthly charge. By twisting it, it sends a message to pre-programmed folks that it says where you are, and it says that you're in trouble or you're uncomfortable or you've activated the device. Okay. Don't add people that don't answer their phone. Okay. You can't, if your mom never answers the phone, or your sister never answers the phone, don't program them. Okay. You want this to be people. So I use my best friend that's a realtor, because realtors always have their phones. And if I find myself in a situation where something's just not right, I can activate this in my pocket, and then she gets the notification, and then she can call me and I can say, oh, I'm so sorry. I have to take this call, step away. You know, we can have a code word or whatever. And I can say, oh, I'm so sorry, family emergency. We've got to wrap this up, to get yourself out of that situation. Okay. Is it going to work in every circumstance? No, but it's something to interrupt that plan. So what I like about this is there's no monthly charge. It's a one-time purchase, and it's Alpha Home. I'm going to put that in the chat for you guys. And then the last thing I'm going to share with you is something you may already have. And again, remember that I sell real estate in rural upstate New York. So this product is twofold for me. Okay. It's bear spray. And bear spray works on humans. So if you ever had to use it. Now, am I going to carry this into a property on Main Street in my market? No, probably not, because my buyers would be like, what the heck are you doing with a can of bear spray, right? But if I'm going to walk vacant land, if I'm going to go to a camp, if I'm going to go to a rural property, something like this could come in very handy. And so this is a brand new bottle. I haven't even put it to use yet, but before you do anything, you unsnap this ahead of time. And then all you have to do is pull the orange off. And do any of you guys ever sell vacant land? Woods, forest? I'll tell you the number one reason why I got this. It wasn't for people. I was walking vacant land with a seller a couple months ago, and it was 30 acres. It was wooded. And I said, so you must have a lot of deer here. He goes, oh, no, not really. I said, huh, that's weird. I wonder why. He said, bears. We're in the middle of the woods. I said, bears? Really? Oh, yeah. He said, I see bears up here all the time. He had no gun. I had no anything. Bear spray, right? So this, again, completely legal. You can buy this online. You may even be able to get this at Walmart. I bought it at the same store that I bought the taser and this little guy, my personal safety store. He has an online store as well. I can send that to you guys. But this was $40, and it would work just as well on humans. It sprays from 30 feet away, so you don't have to be close by. If you ever watched Yellowstone, anybody here ever watch Yellowstone? Yes. Yeah. It works on people, right? So that's another little tool in my toolbox. And the other thing I love about this is if I am going to walk vacant property with a buyer that I'm like maybe not super comfortable with, I'm going to bring this and I'm going to tell them that we're protected. I've got bear spray, and that puts them on notice as well. So again, interrupting that plan that may be out there. Okay. Does anybody else have any personal safety devices that you use or love that you would want to talk about or share?
I have one.
Go ahead.
Before I go out with a buyer, I always either have a Zoom call or have them come to the office, and I get a copy of a pre-approval letter or a proof of funds as to how they're going to buy whatever places I'm going to be showing them. And then I also have them sign the fair housing and the agency disclosure.
Get the disclosures out of the way. Absolutely. That's perfect. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on and how standards of practice plays a role in that. But I love the Zoom call. I'm a big fan of that, and I'll share that with you guys. Thank you. Jennifer says pepper spray, totally legal in New York. Pepper spray is a fantastic idea. Again, something else that would just make you feel more safe. The thing I will tell you, and the personal safety instructor that I work with, if you're going to have any of these devices, including pepper spray or bear spray, test it out. Don't test it on people. Okay. Nobody go home and try it on your spouse, but just get comfortable with it, because it's not going to do you any good if you're fumbling trying to get this off and you can't figure out how to use it. We want to be pretty comfortable with that. So I have 4 or 5 cans of this, and I can, practice every once in a while, make sure I'm comfortable with how it all works. There's also a company called Invisaware. Has anybody ever heard of that or used Invisaware before? So I'll put that in the chat. I've used that as well. You remember the Alex and Ani bracelets? It was like a metal bracelet. The gentleman on here, I apologize, but it had a little charm on it. These look exactly like that, except the charm connects to an app on your phone, and you press it if you feel as though you're in danger, and it does the same thing as my little guy does. And this has a keychain hook. You can't see it because of the camera, but you can hook that on your keychain, so you don't have to carry it in your pocket. Mace is legal. Yep, mace is completely legal. New York City has a different set of rules. So if you're down there and you're selling in that market, you need to follow their local guidelines, but the rest of the state, that is completely legal. There's pen knives. If you haven't checked out the personal safety world, I strongly encourage you to do that. Put some things on your Christmas list or your birthday wish list. For my brokers on here, these make great gifts for your offices. We do something every year in my office, some type of personal safety device to promote that to the agents. Different things are out there. So eKey has an alert on it, and we're going to talk about a few apps as well. If you guys are using Supra, there's a Supra showing time. You guys use showing time, right? Mm-hmm. So they have a showing beacon option. Has anybody ever used that? So showing time has a built-in feature where you can set up a notification that you're starting the showing if you use HomeSnap. HomeSnap is now homes.com, and homes.com doesn't have it, but if you're still using HomeSnap, they had a similar program as well. So there's lots of different things out there to help us. If you're not using something, I encourage you to check that out, put that as part of your business plan for next year, and be as on top of it as you possibly can. That's the Alpha Home device. It comes in black as well. Facebook and Google can also be a good tool. Now, Joanne, yeah, that's a great idea. If you have pepper spray or bear spray, you want to practice using it so you don't spray yourself in the face. Make sure that you know what you're doing when you're using those products, if you're going to. Okay, so Facebook and Google are good resources, and I have little asterisks here in my mind, because a lot of safety instructors will say, just look up your people on social media before you're going to go. And the implicit bias instructor in me has a little bit of a hard time with that for a number of reasons. The other thing I will tell you is, if you use an app like Forewarn or even just Google to look up someone's criminal history, and you say, phew, that person doesn't have a criminal record, not all criminals have been caught. Okay. So just because don't let your guard down, don't let your situational awareness down, just because there's no record of criminal activity that you can find. And the reverse also works. Just because someone had made mistakes in their past, or their social media feed doesn't look like your social media feed, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to harm you. So I have this in here because I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't mention it. But I don't think that this can be our be all end all for how we determine who is safe and who is not safe. Does that make sense? The other thing that I look for on social media, when someone contacts me for the first time, and a lot of my business is based on referral, but if it's not, no one recommended them to me and they weren't referred to me, they just kind of cold called me. If I look them up on social media and we have mutual friends, I have know a lot of people, you guys do too, you're in real estate, that gives me a little more peace of mind. But again, it's not the be all end all. I know lots of people that know lots of people that do bad things. So don't rely solely on that for the good or the bad. Okay, makes sense? Okay. So are there any other personal safety devices, physical tools that you guys are using or have used in the real estate business. Okay, so what I want you to do for homework, check out some of the products I mentioned, check out personal safety devices in general. If you have any type of business in your area, the best thing to do is to go into a store. So typically, you can find a good personal safety device store and talk with someone. The gentleman in my area is fantastic, really knowledgeable, super understanding. And I am, not going to be someone that's going to be interested in carrying a gun. And I don't want to talk politics. That's just my personal. And he, you want to find someone that's going to be understanding one way or the other for you and not going to push you into something. Because if you're not going to use it, then it's not going to help you. Make sense?
Now, I got what I call it my stabber.
Stabber. Okay.
Yeah. I got it taking a defense class.
Mm-hmm.
And it just it's only about like this long, and it has a little point on one end, and then it your fingers wrap around it really well, because it's got where you can put your fingers around it. So when you're holding on to it, you've got a really good grip. That
Danielle's got something. Danielle's got it there. Yep, she's got a stabber.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's great. And then, go for the jugular, as they say, and that's the other thing. If you guys ever find yourself in a situation where you're going to have to put these tools to use, and I hope you never do it with vigor and then get out of there, because we're not trying to be the hero here. We're not trying to, wait around for the authorities to show up. Do what you've got to do and get out of there as quickly as possible. Hopefully you backed your vehicle in. Hopefully your keys are accessible. Your car is full of gas and you can just get out of there, or fully charged if it's electric. So let's talk about some video tour tips. Anybody here do video walkthroughs? Either you shoot the video or it's a FaceTime with your client.
Yeah, I do.
If you're doing those, I've got some safety tips for you. So walk through the house before you get on camera, even if you've shown it before, even if it's your listing, so that you can familiarize yourself with the property, make sure nobody's there that's supposed to be there. Because when we're doing those video tours, we're on our phones, we're looking at the screen. So it's very easy for someone to come out and harm us, because we're distracted by that phone screen, even more than if people were there in person. So check all of those hidden areas, basements, closets. I lock myself into the property and then stop filming to walk up and downstairs. Again, I'm a klutz. And here's the other thing. Nobody wants to hear you like elephants on the stairs, even if you're dainty, light on your feet. It's not an attractive sound on a video. So if you can turn off the film, to do that, that's even more pleasing to your buyer on the other end. But one of the agents in my office was doing a video tour, and she got to the house, she walked through it, everything was fine, but she didn't lock herself in. And she got down to the basement, and all of a sudden someone was halfway down the basement stairs, and she's back in the corner of the basement showing the buyers the furnace. And then here comes this guy down the stairs, and it was the neighbor, and he wanted to know what she was doing in the house, who she was. He was, very authoritative, very in her face, blocking the stairs, wouldn't let her get back up the stairs. It was a very scary situation for her. So she was finally able to get up out of the stairs. Her buyers were on the phone on FaceTime. The buyers, were saying, do you want us to call the authorities? That escalated the situation with the neighbor. So she was able to get up the stairs and get out of the house, get in her car, and contacted our office. We contacted the authorities to go over and talk with the guy and do whatever you have to do. But very scary situations like that can occur. And there was nobody else there physically with her. It was just her folks on FaceTime. So making sure that you take those extra precautions when you're on video. She didn't even hear him come in because she was in the basement, talking on the phone with her clients. So lock yourself in whenever possible. Make sure you do that initial walkthrough to make sure that the house is clear and secure before you start that video. Okay.
Can I say just one thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's really important is that, and I thought about it when you were talking the basement. Some doors, you can get into some houses through the basement, some of the older houses.
Yes.
And so it never dawned on me to do when I'm doing the outside walk around first, to check to see if that door is locked. Couple times
absolutely.
it wasn't, and someone was in there based on the door not being locked.
Yeah.
And fortunately, it wasn't dangerous, but it was pretty surprising to know
Yes.
that I walked the house and somebody was able to come in through that basement door that
Through
I
the
didn't even
basement door.
recognize.
You never know what people are going to do when they're cornered. So checking all of those options, checking all those points of entry, very important, even if you've shown the house before, even if it's your listing. So thank you for that, Sarah. So here is a scenario, something that happened to an agent in my office. They were text messages, conversation with a buyer. Okay. So here she's the green. Okay. She is a female. She's the green. Okay. Sounds good. If you need anything else, please let me know. He wanted to look at properties. He was a buyer. He says, I need a date. I need to go out on a date. She says, excuse me, joking. You asked me if I needed anything else. I say to go out on a date. Okay. Maybe some good places, restaurants. So then she's thinking, okay, maybe he just is not good with words, whatever. I'm a native to the area. I can recommend some restaurants. Then this part, besides the outdoors, what do you do to have fun? Now, this realtor on her personal Facebook page is always outside. She loves to hike. She loves to ride four-wheelers, snowmobile, but she hadn't told him that. So he had found that information and slides it into the conversation. I don't go out much anyway, but I wanted to know what to do when I decide to go out. Okay. So at this point, she's decided that this is not normal buyer behavior. We are not, that's not part of our role. Somebody's here from out of town and they want to know a good restaurant. I can recommend a good restaurant, but to get into conversations like this, very inappropriate. And then he says, unless you know someone that's dating. And she says, I'm sorry, I find this very odd. Is this a joke? I have a boyfriend. Apparently you are not interested in the property. Okay. So he says, I am interested in the property. I'm still waiting to hear from my lender. What's odd about it? How is it odd? I'm looking to meet new people if I move there. So at this point, she decided not to continue working with this person. And my broker decided to assign the person to someone else, with her going on the showing as well. And he never showed up. Okay. So when you are working with folks and they have urgency without specificity, so that means someone calling you, I want to see 123 Main Street and I need to see it today. And that's a vacant house. And you say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not, that property, we can't get into it today, whatever. And then they come up with another vacant house. Urgency without specificity. We had this in our area. So those of you that don't know, I was our board president for 3 years, and last year was my last year as president. So one of my members is calling me on a Sunday telling me how this buyer is reaching out to her and he wants to see only vacant properties and he has to see them that day. And so she's trying to talk to him about what he's looking for in a property, and he can't really give her any information. He can't tell her about the area he wants to be in. He can't tell her about bedrooms, bathrooms. Does he want to be in a rural area? Does he want to be in a village? He can't give her anything other than he needs to see something today. That's a huge red flag. And so I'll give you the long story short about what happened. Her broker got involved. They asked the buyer, to provide some form of identification, hop on a Zoom call, something. He would not do any of that. They contacted the authorities with his phone number, and the authorities said that there was a warrant out for his arrest. They were trying to find this guy, and he had a warrant for sending lewd and inappropriate pictures to women, like just randomly. So, but he didn't have a criminal record. He hadn't been convicted of this crime. They were trying to find him. Those are some warning signs. Questions about vacant properties and proximity of neighbors without asking other questions. Now, I live in a rural area. It's not uncommon for a buyer to tell me, I want to be in a rural area. That's why they're probably moving to where I live. That's not a warning sign to me. But if all you care about is how far away this is from everything else, then that can be a potential warning sign. And any other questions that seem out of the ordinary. You guys are in this business. You know what makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. You know what kind of makes your spidey sense tingle, whatever you want to call it. If you see those, don't just assume that everything is okay. Okay. React to those warning signs, bring in your broker, bring in someone else, your manager, to assist you, to communicate. And again, the Zoom, the FaceTime is a great option. And I'll talk with you guys a little bit more about that. So let's for a moment talk about sellers. I told you in the beginning that the buyers are not the big bad wolf. They may not be the person that harms you. The sellers have an equal opportunity, if not a stronger opportunity, because it's their house. So buyers that want to harm you can only control the environment so much. They see a property that looks vacant online, but they don't know, maybe the listing agent has to be there for every showing. Maybe the sellers have moved back, or there's tenants there and the tenants are going to be there. But if you're a seller who wants to harm someone, now I'm inviting you into my world, right? And someone earlier said, we get on a Zoom and we do a pre-approval and maybe a copy of the ID, depending on our standards of practice. That's great, but nobody's doing that for sellers. So if you get a call to list a property, on the break during this class, you may make an appointment for 3:30 and go right to the property, because listings are scarce everywhere and you don't want somebody else to have that opportunity. So just keep in mind that you could be walking into potential danger. The best way to protect yourself in seller situations is to match names they give you to tax records, deeds, and any other resources. Now, that's public information. So it's possible that the person calling you could be impersonating the person that's on the public records. Okay. Schedule those appointments during daylight hours. Google and use social media to look for mutual friends. Again, keep in mind that's just one tool. That's not the end all be all. Stay behind your sellers and let them guide you through, let them tour you through, start outside, just like we do with buyers. And trust your gut. I'm going to tell you guys a situation that I had happen with sellers who weren't really sellers. And at the time so I was in the office, gentleman called the office. I want to sell my property. I'll meet you there Friday at 2:00. And I said, great. Took the name, took the address, Friday at 2:00. Now, when you're going to a listing appointment, it's a little difficult to get there early because they probably are going to be there, right? So no matter what time you get there, getting there early doesn't solve the problem. But this particular property was a seasonal property. So I took a gamble that they weren't going to be there early. And I drove up to the property. It was very rural, long driveway, way off the road, no cell phone service. I did back my car in. I had my keys in my pocket and, got out and I kind of walked around the outside. But this house isn't for sale, so I'm not going to go in the house without the sellers there. Their vehicle comes down the driveway. The tax records are in one man's name. That was the name I was given when he called. Truck comes down the road, no license plates, front or back on the truck. That was warning sign number one. This was the middle of July, super hot day. Two men, not one, get out of the vehicle. Okay. Now I'm telling myself, okay, maybe this is his buddy or his family member, whatever. Maybe the license plate fell off on the way there. All the things you tell yourself to calm yourself down, right? Both men get out of the vehicle. Both have long black pants on, long sleeve black shirt, boots. Both men put on black gloves, like black gloves. The one guy walked around the back of the camp. Now, to get up to the camp is a long staircase, okay? Other guy comes over, doesn't take his glove off to shake my hand, isn't really making eye contact, but isn't looking at the property either. When you first meet a seller, they're excited usually to meet you. They're excited to show you about their property and show you their diamond in the rough. Every seller thinks their property is the best property, right? That was not the circumstance here. This guy was barely even talking. So I said, well, why don't you show me around the outside? And he said, no, let's go up. Okay, so we go up the stairs. I did let him go first. We get inside the cabin. It was clear that no one had been in the cabin for a very long time. There was a second floor, a loft, huge wall of windows that looks out at a beautiful landscape. So I'm walking over to the windows, tell me about the property. I'm asking questions I know the answer to. How long have you owned the property? Right? Is this a seasonal property for you? He's kind of answering, but not really. So I'm over at the wall of windows. I can feel him staring at me. You know how you can just feel somebody staring at you? I could feel him staring at me. And I said, this is a beautiful view. Tell me your favorite thing about this property. That's one of my favorite questions to ask sellers anyway. And he said, let's go upstairs. And I turned around, he was behind me, but I could get to the door, and I ran to that door. I went down the stairs, got in my car, and left. As soon as I got to cell phone service, called my broker. My broker reached out to him the next day and said, you know, this is my name, my broker, my agent had an emergency. She had to leave. You know, if you're still interested in listing your property. Never got a call back. We tried the number again a few days later. It had been disconnected. The property never went on the market. So in hindsight, I would have never even gone up those stairs. You know, given the circumstances, I would have come up with some other kind of excuse. One sale, even if it was a legitimate seller, one sale is not worth your life to me. My family needs me more than my broker needs that one sale, or more than I need that one sale. So that was a potential seller. Okay. I do not believe for a second that they ever had any interest in selling their property. If they did, they would have thought awful of me and called another broker. They didn't. They wouldn't have disconnected their phone 2 or 3 days later. You know, just all those red flags. You can't let your need to want to have that sale take over, you know, all of those red flags. The gloves were a big question mark. And so I've shared that story a few different times. One time I shared it at a safety panel with other law enforcement officers. And when I got to the part about the gloves, the officer was like, whoa, that's a major red flag. No license plate, major red flag. Sarah in the beginning said she was jotting down the license plate number. One thing I will do, maybe it would ever make a difference. Maybe it just makes me feel better, but I'll take a picture of a license plate if I'm feeling uneasy and text it to my broker or my friend that's a realtor. Someone always knows where I am. I share my calendar with my spouse, so my husband always knows where I am based on that. But Apple allows you to share your location. You can do that if it's the location of your phone. So if you get separated from your phone, it's not going to help you. But another way to just feel better. Also, too, you can work into the conversation. You know, oh, you know, after this, I'm on my way. I'm expected at another appointment, or, you know, whatever. If you're feeling uneasy, anything you can do to disrupt that plan that person may have is going to be helpful to you. Okay. So just keep in mind that buyers are not always going to be the threat. It could be a seller as well. So before we move into talking about safety tips for our sellers, I'm going to give you guys a 10-minute break. So it's 2:04. Come back here at 2:14. Don't leave the Zoom. Okay. Just step away from your device. You can turn your camera off if you want. You just have to turn it back on. And when you come back from the break, just pop your name in the chat. Okay. So 2:14.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead with your question.
Why would you go out in the country without bringing another agent with you?
Okay.
Doesn't make any sense to me. I would never go out by myself.
Here's my philosophy, Judy. The person that I would bring with me would probably be another agent from my office. And while that would probably disrupt the plan from a criminal, there's not a whole lot more that my broker or another gal in my office is going to be able to do. I understand completely where you're coming from, and the buddy system is a great way. For me personally, it doesn't alleviate my fears, because I feel like then just 2 of us would get killed. So how rational that is, I don't know. I will tell you to do what works for you. So if you are good with the buddy system and that practice has worked for you, keep doing that. That's just my personal, you know, I'm a catastrophizer. So if the worst case is going to happen, I'm going to imagine it happening. And for me, that would be both of us getting harmed.
So why wouldn't you walk away when you saw that there was no license plate and gloves on?
Absolutely. I should have.
Horrible
100%.
sign. Yeah. Yeah.
100%. I should have. I was a newer realtor. I was excited about getting a listing. And, you know, that's why I share that story, because I don't want people to make the same mistake that I made. It was a huge red flag in the middle of July. And the other guy never introduced himself to me, just walked around the back of the property and I didn't see him again. All those body language things, I didn't have this training then. I was like a brand new baby realtor. So that's why I share that story, so that you guys can learn from my stupid mistakes. All right. Enjoy your break, guys. I'll be here if anybody else has questions. I'm not going anywhere.
Brittany,
Yes.
I remember I had a situation once with an open house, and
Oh.
people were coming in, and it was a high-end house, and a buyer came in, and he was doing the same thing. He was just staring at me, and I said, "Well, can I ask what you're looking for and your name and blah blah blah?" And he said, "Well, I'm looking at." He was telling me he was looking at houses that were a lot cheaper as well. So I was just kind of wondering why it was there. And the
Right.
whole time he never once looked at the house. He just stayed right by my side and asked questions and just seemed like he was focused more on me. So as the buyers were walking out from the open house, as people were walking out, there was a couple standing there, and I kept talking to him and talking to him, keep their attention so I can try and get him towards the door. And I was like pleading with them with my eyes, like, don't leave, you know? And so they were walking out, and I kind of took the door to kind of like make him leave. So I got him out and I immediately locked the door.
Good
Within
job.
seconds, the doorbell rang, and I look out and it was him. And I said, "I'm sorry, I'm closing up."
Yep.
And I never let him back in.
Good for you. I would have barricaded myself in that house until help came if I had to.
Yeah, it was very, very,
Yeah.
he just didn't have any interest in the house. He was just following me all over.
And, you know, I think that's the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway. And that comes from knowing, that comes from experience. You know, being a brand new baby realtor, I didn't necessarily know in a lot of situations, like how buyers were supposed to behave. And
Right,
so,
I wouldn't have either, not
yeah,
being
you
new.
learn that it's not something you can put in words. You know, when I'm training new agents in my office, I make them do, or I encourage them, you can't make them do anything, but I encourage them to do ride-alongs with me so that they can learn that buyer behavior before they get a loan. Because, you know, if you don't, and seller behavior too, if you don't learn what's ordinary, you won't know how to recognize what's out of the ordinary.
Right, exactly. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's scary. And we're going to talk about open houses, and when everybody comes back, if you're comfortable sharing that story, you can, but I
Sure.
won't put you on the spot. That's
No,
up to you.
no, I'll share it. I didn't know if we were going to do that, so I
We
didn't want to.
will. Yeah. Thank you for
Okay.
that. We're gonna talk about open houses and best practices um and all of that. But as a practice, I'll tell you this, as a practice, I don't do open houses for that reason. Number one, well, two reasons. Number one, in my area, they don't work. Nobody shows up, nobody comes. It's just me sitting there with my computer for 2 hours. But also for safety reasons. And, you know, I tell my sellers, it's my job to protect your property. Do you really want me to invite, the general public into your home? If it's vacant, I guess that's one thing, but otherwise we want to have some measure of control over, the folks that are coming through. You have a right to know. So,
Yeah,
but
and luckily we
your
haven't
market,
really had to do open houses.
right.
With COVID, we didn't, and with the market so quick, I haven't done an open house on any of my listings in a long time.
Yeah,
I'm
and
quite
it's
happy with
interesting.
that.
Me too. And it was a tool that we used when a property wasn't selling.
Yeah,
But in other areas of the state, like in Long Island, that's how they sell properties. Typically, they don't do private showings. They hold an open house, 50 buyers come through and they get 25 offers. And, it just depends on your market and your customs. And I'm not unrealistic to think that if it's customary, you got to do what other folks do. But
right.
protecting yourself, we're going to talk about some best practices for that for sure. And that one, I do strongly encourage some type of a buddy system for, and we'll talk about that. If you guys are coming back, you've got 2 minutes. And if you are back, just pop your name in the chat so that Danielle knows that you returned. We still have 2 minutes though, so you can refill and get comfy.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, there's something that I just got a phone call of something that I want to mention like right now during this. I had gotten a call from someone who was looking for a seller agent. She said she found me online. She wasn't giving me much information as to anything about anything, but she wanted to show me her house and see if I would, consider selling her house. And so the conversation was very short, very uninformative from her part. Asking her questions, she didn't give me a whole lot of really good answers. But at the same time, I am more familiar with the buyer agency than I am seller, and I'm just getting into seller. So I contacted a seller agent that I know and thought we could work together on it. And I'm more in the lawn outside right now, but I thought maybe we could go with it together and she'd be there too. Well, she went and she said it was just really very strange. It was a house, it was a really older lady, and it was just a house full of stuff. And I said to her, well, how did she appear to want to sell the house? And she said she couldn't get a whole lot of really information out of her. But then after things were over, she tried to make contact to, see how things went. I tried to make contact with her to see how things went. She's not calling us back, but she calls when she wants to, because she called me and said, I thought you were coming. And I said, well, no, I thought it'd be best that you communicate at first with the actual seller professional that's been doing that side for a very long time. And she said, oh, and it just was really bizarre because she wanted me, but then she wasn't really looking to sell a house.
Yeah, it sounds like she is a little confused on her path and maybe just wanted some company or something.
I don't know, but
Strange.
it's one of those things where you get a call and you go there and it's like, well, maybe she's got time to sit and talk to me. Or
Yeah, some people aren't a safety threat; they're just a time suck.
they're just
yeah.
Yeah, so I'm getting a call from the agent now saying it makes me feel like a time waster.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that it
Well,
was.
that's a part of this business,
That's
unfortunately.
right. Well, if
I
it's that,
encourage
that's
them.
not bad compared to the other bizarre things. And I've
Sure,
had many.
absolutely.
Oh my God, I've had many. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay,
Mm.
welcome back, everyone. We have 45 minutes left together this afternoon. Time is flying right by. I hope it is for you as well. Hope you're engaging. Thank you guys for sharing. Hope you're learning a little bit, being reminded of a few things, and maybe having a little fun along the way as well. So Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. So let's talk for a few moments together about safety for our sellers. So now let's decide that the sellers are not going to harm us. They are actual legitimate sellers who want to sell their properties. They want to engage the services of a realtor, and they've contacted us. We have a duty to educate them on the process a bit, and whenever possible, protect them and be a steward for their property. So when I'm working with sellers, we discuss safety protocols and precautions at the listing appointment, sometimes even at the listing interview, because I want my clients and potential clients to know that I take their safety and the safety of their property very, very seriously. So I encourage them to remove or lock up any safety items such as weapons, but specifically medications. If you've ever had a buyer, or it may not be your buyer, it may be somebody else's, want to use the restroom. I don't like to let people do that in other people's houses, but if they've got to go, what are you going to do? Where are medications kept? In a medicine cabinet. And I'm not going to go into the restroom with them. So making sure that medications are secured and locked up. And especially weapons, I think this goes without saying, but especially weapons locked up and secured. You may even want to encourage them to remove or take down personal family photos. I listed a property for a female state trooper who had this beautiful collage of her two little girls from this photo shoot. And, they're sweet little innocent babies and toddlers, and they're like in these little wash tubs, but they don't have clothes on. That's fine in her house. It's adorable, but there's a lot of really gross, sick people in the world. And these pictures are going to be on the internet. And once they get out into the internet, I can't necessarily, interesting. Yeah. Matthew Perry said that he used to go to open houses and steal medications from the medicine cabinet in the bathroom. Absolutely. Because that's where those items are kept. And specifically folks where you know that the folks there are older, because they're most likely to have those prescription pain medications that people are typically looking for. So it's not just about decluttering a house, but depersonalizing as well, because I want my sellers to realize that these pictures are going to go out on the internet, and there's going to be pictures of your pictures. And you may not want those online. So we've got a plan for that. Securing valuables on the property. If you've got great grandmother's diamond earrings, don't keep them in the jewelry box. Keep them in the safe, because people are going to be walking through the house, and we're going to do our best to keep folks together. But I think all of you can agree, sometimes they don't stay together. And I can't put a leash on the buyers and cling them. I'm doing my best, but things happen. So securing those as well. Having a conversation about cameras. Will there be cameras on the property? Will those cameras be on? In New York State, if the sellers are going to have audio on, that has to be disclosed. Okay. So I'm sure you have some type of disclosure in your MLS that you use. We do. I'm sure you do too. But I have a conversation with my sellers about that. Do you have cameras on the property, and are they going to be engaged? And are we going to require pre-approval and or ID for showings? Now we're going to get to standards of practice. And for those of you that need a refresher on what that is, we're going to talk about it. But remember, the seller can always set that policy. So I say to my sellers, to best protect you and your property, and because you don't want to drag the kids and the dog and everybody out of the house on a Sunday morning for a showing for buyers that aren't pre-approved, are you comfortable requiring pre-approval and or ID for everyone that wants to see the house? Now, there's an asterisk here that is, if you do it for one, you have to do it for all. Okay. So I don't sell in your market, but pretend that I do. Sarah wants to show my listing. I can't ask her for her buyer's pre-approval and then not ask Joanne when Joanne calls me. We've got to do it for everybody. If I do it for Sarah's buyers, I have to do it for my own buyers. So just keep in mind that there has to be consistency. And once your sellers set that policy, that has to stay. And how's access to the property going to be handled? You guys use Supra, explaining to sellers what that means, who can access the box. Will they get notifications when it's being accessed? Will it just be you? What does that look like? Is it the door going to be unlocked? Is there a key under the mat? What's the most secure way? The key under the mat is always a riot to me, because when the buyer's agent shows up at the same time as the buyer and reaches under the mat to grab the key, who just saw her do that or him do that, right? The buyer. So that may not be the best way to handle key access. If that's how they're handling it, a secure form of access is your best bet, whether that's Supra or a key at the office or a mechanical lockbox or whatever you're going to use. We need to have some way to securely access the property. Okay. So I do that again with my sellers as part of the listing appointment, and even sometimes as part of the listing interview, because I'm thinking and hoping and banking that my competitors are not going to bring that up. And while it's important to get the listing, if my sellers don't know all the things that I bring to the table, including all this knowledge and all these precautions, then how are they going to know to hire me? Most of you are doing this stuff already, but communicating it to your sellers helps you show a little more value to them in the transaction. Okay. When we're talking about foreclosures or vacant properties, best practices are to pay extra attention to your surroundings, because the seller of the property is probably a bank. The bank has never been to the property. They have a property management company that comes every so often. And, you're not communicating directly with that person. So pay extra attention with your surroundings. Take someone with you if possible. Now, remember I said earlier, if you guys were still around before we started the break, the buddy system, it's hit or miss for me, because the catastrophizer in me thinks, okay, great, we're both just going to get harmed. But it can be very valuable to have a second person there, especially if that second person, can help you kind of get things settled, check around the surroundings and that type of thing. Walk through the house before you start taking your pictures and your videos and everything, so you get a lay of the land, you get your situational awareness set, and you checked everything. Even if you've been there before, always be cautious, because you never know who have gotten in through a basement window, or who has been able to get into that property and maybe squatting there and feel cornered, and now you are entering their domain. So this particular house was a property that I showed. It wasn't my listing. It was a vacant house. I showed it probably 15 times. It was on the market. This was before COVID. Okay. Remember back when houses used to stay on the market for more than 5 minutes? This house was on the market for a whole summer, and it's on a busy street. It's on the main street in Potsdam, which is one of the bigger areas where I live. The hospital is like 4 blocks down, the big regional hospital. So this is not in an area where I would be, concerned about the fact that it's rural. It's right in the village. Lots of people walking by on the sidewalk. I showed it many, many times. I was showing buyers that I had been working with for quite some time properties, and we were doing marathon showings, which is what I call when you go to see more than one house in a day. So they were right behind me, couldn't get there early. House was vacant. Just like Sarah's story in the beginning, I walked in, realtor here for the showing. My people are behind me because I'm getting the door unlocked. I open the door, I let them go in, and it's a split level. So you go up, you go down. The first thing I see, just above eye level is like pizza boxes and liquor bottles. And there's hair pieces and clothes and a mattress. And I looked right at my buyers and I said, nope, we're out of here. This house is supposed to be vacant. This is not right. Out, out, out. And so I gather them. We go out. I lock the door behind me. I call the listing agent right away. She had the authorities go over. There were squatters and they were hiding in the basement when the authorities got there. They had drugs. They had weapons in the house. And I had shown this house a dozen times. It was right in the village. The neighbors hadn't reported anything. Nobody had seen anything. And they had gotten in through one of these basement windows that you see here down on the ground level. On the back side, somebody had just popped the window open, slid down in and closed it back up. It looked completely normal from the outside. So be aware of your surroundings, even if you've been to the house before, even if it's your listing. Okay. we've talked a little bit about stories and times that you guys have ever felt unsafe. I'm going to put you guys in some breakout groups for just a couple minutes to talk about, of course, only if you feel comfortable, but times that you maybe felt unsafe, felt like things weren't quite right, and any safety measures, you know, that you may have in your offices. So let me just do this. I'm going to pop you guys into breakout rooms. You're just going to have a couple minutes to do this because we shared things already, and then I'll bring you right back and we'll move on. Okay, here we go. You'll get automatically moved. There you go. You're all going. Okay, we're going to give everybody another 20 seconds to come back. Make sure we get everybody here. No realtor left behind. Okay. We're starting to get everybody else. Hopefully we didn't lose anybody along the way. There's 13, 14, 15. Here you come. Okay. Did anybody have anything they wanted to share from their group relatively quickly? Because I've got some other stuff to share with you guys, but did anything pop up that you think is worth talking about? No, you're good? Okay.
The only thing I will say is that before you go out and meet someone that you don't know, you got to do research. You got to check them out. You have to look them up on LinkedIn. Do they know anybody that you know? Call that person and find out what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Do they know anybody that you know? Gives me kind of, peace of mind that I'm probably not mutual friends with a serial killer.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
I laugh, but I don't laugh. Okay, let's talk about office policies for a few moments. So if you have an office policy for safety, great. I hope you guys talk about it often. I hope you update it often. I hope you practice and do role playing different scenarios often. If you don't have something, please encourage your broker or your office manager to have a policy and share it with all of you. Does anybody here still do desk time or opportunity time where you're at the office answering the phone if somebody calls or something like that? If you do that, strongly encourage you to, have systems in place, safety words like other offices have said, someone comes into the office, okay, and you're feeling unsafe. And Judy is my office mate or my broker. I could say, oh, just one moment. I need to make a phone call. I could call Judy and say, hey, Judy, I'm here at the office. You left the red folder and I know you needed that. Judy would know that that means something's not right at the office, and either she can come, she can send somebody, whatever the case may be, without me saying, hey, I'm creeped out by somebody that's here. Using things like that, code words like that, can be helpful. Always tell someone where you are, take someone with you whenever appropriate, whenever possible. I was telling folks on the break, the agents that come on new in my office as brand new baby realtors, I strongly encourage them to do ride along appointments with me, showings and listings, because you don't get to know what is out of the ordinary behavior if you don't know what's ordinary. So if you're limited exposure to it, and statistically, new realtors are more likely to say yes to uncomfortable situations because they're new, they're trying, where me, and probably some of you are at points in your career where you're like, yeah, I don't need to risk my safety for this. I can refer this business out, or, I can, pass this buyer on to someone on my team, whatever. But if you're brand new, you're super excited about that phone call, and you may not do all the checks and hear all the bells and whistles going off because you don't know what's not ordinary yet. So making sure that you have those protocols in place can be very helpful. So most of you hopefully know what happened to our friends in Bridgeview Real Estate several years ago. There was, those of you that don't, there was a former agent from Bridgeview who was disgruntled, had left the firm, had a mental psychotic break, a mental episode, went into the brokerage office, and shot and killed his two former brokers that were there in the office. And there was a third person in the office that day. That third person was able to avoid the gentleman, the killer, and contact the police and let them know about his vehicle, who he was, and they were able to track him down. He went on a high-speed chase, went flying right by my office through St. Lawrence County, headed up towards Franklin, where then he took his own life. So having those things in the office here is something that this was actually in a Rochester classroom, but this isn't a panic button. It's an emergency button. Having these in your offices are a very good idea if you do any type of desk time, any type of opportunity time, something comes in. You don't want it to set off every alarm bell necessarily, but it will notify someone of an emergency discreetly without, identifying, put this under your desk, put this wherever. You don't want it mounted on the wall, so you walk over and slam on it. But a good idea if you're doing any type of office time, any type of opportunity time, because you never know, who's going to come in off the street as a member of the public. We talked a little bit earlier about identification and letters of pre-approval. So these two safety precautions can be very helpful. But in New York State, we have standards of practice. So hopefully all of you know what this is. If you don't know what this is, get with your broker, get with your office manager, and have them explain to you what they are for your office, because each broker in New York State had to set these policies, and they have to be published publicly. If you have an office website, they have to be on your office website, and every agent in the office has to follow it. So if your broker says that prospective buyer clients are not required to show ID, not required to sign an exclusive buyer's representation agreement, and not required to provide pre-approval or proof of funds, you can't make that a requirement to show someone a property. Now, remember I said the seller can supersede that. So if my broker says we don't require letters of pre-approval, Judy has a listing and I want to show Judy's listing, and her seller has said pre-approval required, then guess what? I have to tell my buyer it's pre-approval required, and I want to give Judy a great big hug for doing that, because now I have reassurance that my buyer client can actually purchase the property. So when I'm a listing agent, I do that to protect my sellers and make sure that the folks that are coming through the property, are qualified to buy. And in all the years I've been doing that, I've only had one seller ever say, no, we don't care if they're pre-qualified. They don't have to be pre-qualified. They can just come look at the house. All the other sellers say, yeah, of course we want them to be pre-qualified or provide proof of funds. Now, the other thing about standards of practice is, just because standards of practice says that it can't be required, that doesn't mean that as part of the consultation process, as part of the conversation process with the buyer, you can't ask them if they are pre-approved or do they have proof of funds. And that's another thing that can kind of give you an idea of how, interested they are as a buyer, or are they someone who's just trying to maybe harm you or fishing for information? That's another type of safety concern we have. Are they a legitimate person? How do you plan to fund this purchase? Oh, you have cash? Okay, great. Would you mind sending me over proof of funds? As long as you don't make it a requirement for showing them property, and as long as you treat everyone the same and follow fair housing, then we don't have a violation concern there. We don't have an equality issue there. We just have to remember to follow the standards of practice set by our broker. Okay, does that make sense to everyone? Any questions on that? Okay, I know we kind of touched on that earlier. So another practice that we talked about that I think is so valuable, one thing that COVID gave us was everyone and their brother knows how to use Zoom now, or FaceTime. So if a buyer contacts me, or even a seller, they want to list their property, they want to go see 123 Main Street, absolutely. Do you have like 2 to 3 minutes to hop on a Zoom with me before we set, so we can set up the appointment and talk about a few things? So it doesn't have to be a 45-minute conversation, but I can see their face, they can see my face, right? I can get a feel for, how serious they are about buying a property. At 3 words that you can always use: tell me more. I love that you want to see this property. I'll be happy to show it to you. Tell me more about what you like about this property. Have you been looking for a property? Ask those questions and get folks talking, because we know that an ordinary buyer is going to love to tell you everything. Oh, well, this is the perfect property for us because it's right down the road from my parents, and we want to be able to go down there for dinner or whatever. We love this area, my husband works across the street, or my sister, blah blah blah, whatever. It also gives you the opportunity to discuss agency and fair housing, which have to be discussed at first substantive contact. I'm not a fan of doing that on the hood of my car on a windy, rainy day. I don't want to be doing that, when we're outside walking around the outside of the property and they start talking to me about, things specific for them or a conversation of substance, I don't want to have to say, oh, stop right there. We now have to do these disclosures. I want to do them ahead of time. So if I'm going to be working with someone, I want to follow the law and get those disclosures done. So doing them face to face like this is a great way. And if you have a consumer that is not willing to do that, to me personally, that's a huge red flag. And that happened earlier this year. And I'll tell you guys about that in a few moments when we get to kind of how that happened. I'll share with you. But you know, it may just be they're not comfortable with it. Then you get to decide whether you're going to continue working with them or not. Because I said it earlier, I'll say it again. Your family needs you to come home. Your family needs you to be there more than you need, you know, this one commission, this one sale. So if they won't get on the Zoom, they won't get on the FaceTime. I'm not saying never talk to them again, but take some more precautions. Maybe that's an appointment you take somebody with. Maybe that's an appointment that, you know, if they don't want to do the Zoom, come to the office, meet me at Dunkin' Donuts, whatever the case may be, just to put you more, you know, more at ease. Okay. Because remember, guys, criminals are not a protected class. So if you have a gut feeling that something isn't right, there are red flags going up, the guys are putting on gloves, there's no license plate, the buyer won't get on FaceTime, they don't want to tell you what they're interested in about the house, they just want to see the house and they have to see it today, and you have to be the one to show it to them, right? If we have urgency without specificity, then perhaps we have a red flag. Okay. Let's talk for a few minutes about open houses. You guys do open houses, right? They still happen in your area. So open houses are a huge safety concern for me. I feel like it's putting a sign out in the front yard. Remember, I'm a catastrophizer, so I'm putting a sign out in the front yard. I'm here, come get me, right? If you're going to have some best practices, one thing I'm going to strongly encourage you to do is a sign-in sheet. You can get your seller's permission ahead of time to ask everyone to provide ID, have a sign on the door that says, please have ID ready, take a picture of their ID, whatever. You can't steal someone's identity with a copy of their driver's license. So there's no concern there from a buyer's standpoint that, you know, you're putting their identity at risk. There's very few things that you can do with their driver's license. So the seller can make that a requirement that you get those as part of the open house. And having a sign-in sheet, can someone sign in and put a fake name down? Yeah, but they probably don't have a fake ID as well. So, you know, just take your time, slow down, maybe have the entrance to the open house, especially if it's a beautiful day. It's not the kitchen table, it's the front porch. You know, I have a little folding table. Sometimes I'll have the sign and be outside so that I'm not letting you in the property, you know, before. And always, always, always bring someone with you for an open house. Local vendors like banks, title companies, home inspectors, they love to partner with open houses because they're going to get access to a buyer list as well. That's what they're doing it for, leads. And sometimes you can even get, especially the banks, to pay for the food. So that's always a good thing. If not, bring somebody else from your office. I have somebody, you know, that's kind of doing sign-in, check-in on the front porch, somebody who is taking folks through or, you know, kind of getting them through the property. Always, always 2 people at an open house, at least. If I'm going to do one, there's going to be at least 2 people there. Arrive while the owners are still there if possible. So I'll tell my sellers, okay, we're going to do the open house at 9 o'clock. I'm going to be there by 8:45. If you guys would just stick around until I get there, because remember, you've advertised that you're going to be there. So you don't want people there before you get there. And if they are, you want your sellers still there too. So you have that extra layer of protection. Okay. Ask everyone to sign in and take accompanied tours. It's okay to be in control. An open house doesn't mean that the buyers get to have a free-for-all. It just means they didn't need an appointment to get there. So thank you so much for coming today. What we're going to do is take an accompanied tour. I have Sarah here and she's going to walk you through the house. And if no one is available to give the tours, it's okay to say to the buyers, we don't have anyone to accompany you through right now. I'm just going to ask you to wait. You can wait in your car. You can wait here on the porch, and we'll have someone to take you through in just a few minutes. It's okay to do that, right? They're there because they want to see the property. If that's what they're truly there for, they're going to wait. It won't take long. just have, kind of that plan in place and be in control of that. That's another thing, to interrupt someone's plan. If someone's planning on harming you as part of an open house, they plan on getting there, getting in that house and getting you alone. If you can interrupt that plan by saying, okay, well, my open house partner today, Sarah, is upstairs with buyers right now. I'm sure she'll be right down. And as soon as she comes out, I'm picking on you, Sarah, because I've got you right here on my screen. She'll be right down, and then we'll get you set up for your tour. Okay, we're doing a company tours. This is a seller's request. Have that conversation with your sellers ahead of time. We're going to host an open house, and this is how we're going to run it. I promise you, sellers don't want buyers rummaging through their bedroom drawers unaccompanied. They want us there with them, so we can control that traffic. I loved it during COVID, because if you were going to do an open house, it was one person in the house per showing, right? Or per open house, right? So one person goes in, or one family pod, whatever that looks like, goes in. And when that family pod is done, the next goes in. I still do that if I'm going to do an open house. When the open house is over, lock yourself in the house, then go through and check everything, get your lights off. Don't leave that door unlocked, for someone else, a straggler, to come in. Because again, if someone's going to harm you, they're likely not going to come right smack dab in the middle when other people may be there, right? They're most likely going to wait until the end to see what they can get away with when everybody else is gone. So I would secure, again, only one door open during that open house. So I would secure the door I knew was unlocked, check the other doors, make sure nobody else unlocked anything, lock myself in, and then check the property top to bottom, turn the lights off, etc. Check for stragglers. If you're doing a company tours, you don't have stragglers, and make sure that that home is completely secure when you're leaving. I usually, will leave with being on the phone with someone. I'll have an AirPod in, whether it's another agent, if I'm there by myself, or with someone else, making sure that we're together. Okay. Does anybody else have any best practices or anything you want to share about open houses?
As far as what situations have happened?
Yeah, go, if you want to share, Joanne, go ahead.
Yes, I was doing an open house and it was a high-end property and there were a lot of buyers coming through. And of course, when I introduce myself to them, I'll say, do you go in the kitchen? There's my sign-in sheet. And one person came in and I said the same thing to him and he didn't leave and he stood right there and he kept staring at me and watching me as I'm interacting with other people. And he pretty much was stuck right near me, which was making me very uncomfortable. So he didn't go around and look at the house. I asked him what in particular was he looking for. And he said, oh, I just came from $150,000 house. Now this house was 300 plus. So I'm like, okay, that's kind of odd. You'd go from one to the other like that. So as everybody was leaving, he was still standing right there and I just felt uncomfortable. So there was the last couple that was there and I kept talking to them and asking questions and pleading with them with my eyes, like, please don't leave me here. And finally I'm getting them out the door and I managed to get him out the door and shut it and lock it behind me. And within a few minutes later, the doorbell rang and he was standing outside and I did not let him in. And then I waited a while before I left. That was an uncomfortable situation.
Definitely. Yeah. And when you were sharing that on the break, I said I would barricade myself in that house until the cavalry came for me. Because, you don't know where somebody might be hiding. And that's the other thing. You can feel free, in circumstances like that, call the seller, and say, look, I just had this open house and this uncomfortable thing happened. And, it may be nothing, but just wanted to alert you, and I'll tell you how the open house went too. Call the seller, call local law enforcement, call whomever, to come and be your assistant. So thank you very much for sharing that, Joanne. Did anybody else have anything you wanted to share about open houses before we move on? If you want this sign-in sheet, I have it in this version. I can send it to you. I think I just got it on Etsy or Google, or you can make your own, whatever, but some type of record as to who comes into the property is helpful. Does anybody here do property management at all? Dealing with tenants and taking care of rental properties? I'm seeing lots of no faces. Okay, so we're going to go through this portion kind of quickly as we wrap up here. If you want more information on this, if you are a property manager, you can reach out and I'll be happy to send. But best practice, know your state and local laws, use attorney approved rental applications if you're going to use rental applications, and engage local law enforcement whenever necessary when dealing with tenants in particular. The biggest thing I can tell you about property management is stay in your lane. And what I mean by that is having a strong network of professionals that can handle tenant issues as they arise. I certainly, as a property manager, can handle collecting the rent. I can handle the rental applications. I can show the property. But if we have a situation like this, I'm not going to clean that up. Not because I'm above it, but because you don't know what's in that mess, right? And I don't have the equipment to properly take care of that. You need a hazmat suit, you need all kinds, you don't know what you're going to find. So if you're going to do property management, just make sure you have a network of professionals that you can engage to handle situations like this that may arise, because people do leave stuff like this. I had it happen. A tenant had moved out of an apartment, didn't notify me, didn't notify the seller. The property was simultaneously on the market. So another agent showed it and called me and said, there's something really wrong. This is going on in one of the bedrooms, but there's also 3 cats. And he had left 3 cats for at least 6 days. The last time a neighbor had seen him was 6 days. So I went over to the property. I did get the cats. I took them to the local animal shelter. One of them, was barely alive at that point, but they had torn the apartment to shreds looking for food or water. Refrigerator full of food, freezer full of food. The tenant had unplugged it and just walked out. So I'm not equipped to deal with that. And so I have to have a network of people that are equipped to handle those types of things. So if you're going to do property management, just make sure that you do. We're going to spend the last few minutes talking about online security. In today's world, we are just as much at risk without stepping foot into a property. Certainly maybe our physical safety is not as at risk, but our financial safety and our clients' financial safety with their data. So hopefully you're doing something to back up your data. I store everything on OneDrive, which is a Microsoft product. There's also Google Drive. Those are cloud storage products. The best test that I can tell you to do is if your computer or your device failed tomorrow or was hacked tomorrow, could you just go to the store and buy a new one and then re-upload your information from the cloud? If the answer is yes, then you're good. You're checking the boxes. If you're hard storing things on the computer, and I can be super techie, so I'm not going to get too into the weeds with you guys on this, you want to use a program like Carbonite that provides a full backup of your computer to an off-site place so that if something happened, then you could just replace everything. If you have trouble remembering your passwords like I do, and you have 100 little pieces of paper everywhere, or you use the same password for everything, Dashlane is a free program that it's a password locker. That's all they do is store passwords. You have one master password, make that super complicated, super hard. And then it stores all of your passwords for all of your other programs, that whether it's your bank accounts or just all the dozens of online places that we have, then it's locked in there with 2-factor authentication, very secure. And if you are seriously concerned about safety, you can look into a private VPN. Again, I don't want to get too into the weeds with you guys, but if you want additional information on that, please feel free to reach out. I use my computer at other folks' places. I take it to listing appointments, and I don't get on somebody else's Wi-Fi. That's one of the most unsecure things you can do. Airport Wi-Fi, hotel Wi-Fi. So private VPNs allow you to have your own internet server that is encrypted and secure. Another thing that we have to have on our radar as realtors is if the last 2 hours wasn't enough, we also have to be aware of the numerous scams that our clients are exposed to. One of them is file encryption on your computer. If you've ever seen a message like this, the best thing that you can do is wipe that computer out, take it to a specialist, or wipe it out yourself and reload everything. Another big scam out there is wire fraud. I'm sure all of you have received emails from attorneys that say, we will never, ask you for your wire information. We will never blah, 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 blah. We will call you, we will have a 2-factor authentication. It's a huge problem where folks are wiring. Someone pretends, what this looks like is someone pretends to be the transaction title company or attorney and contacts the buyer and says, great, I'm so-and-so representative from XYZ title company. We're ready to close. I need you to wire me your closing funds. And people send their down payment and their closing costs, and it's a scam. And so can you imagine being a buyer and you get scammed out of your 100 and some thousand, or your 80 some thousand, or your 50 some $1,000 right before closing, and now you can't buy your home? It's horrible. So having a conversation with your consumers about wire fraud, that no one will ever ask you this in an email. If someone calls you, they can spoof the number coming in, but they can't reroute the call. So if there's ever any doubt, hang up with that person and dial the company back, or call me, and I will tell you whether or not that is legitimate and what the policies are. Because someone using a spoofer can pretend to be Mary Jo, saying, hey, this is Mary Jo, your realtor, and her number would show up on the phone, but it would not be her. So we have to be very mindful of all of these different fraud scams. And WhatsApp is a common app used in real estate, especially with international buyers, completely legitimate. But I had a buyer contact me earlier this year wanting to purchase property, and I say it in air quotes because the whole thing was a scam. And we had very robot answers coming back. This particular person, which I'm not even convinced was a real person, reached out to several agents in my office, answered the questions the same way, and the answers didn't really make sense to the questions that we were asking. Would not get on a Zoom, would not get on a FaceTime. And what the ultimate scam is, you ask them for how they're going to fund the property, and they're excited to tell you that they're going to pay cash. And so your natural response is, great, send me proof of funds. So they email you or put it in WhatsApp, their proof of funds, which is actually a Trojan horse virus for your computer that encrypts and locks all your files, and then you have to pay to get out, right? Or they're trying to access private information that you have stored on your computer to extort money from you. Those are all types of scams. So if something doesn't sound right, the responses aren't normal, then in my circumstance, all I had to do was go into my group chat with my office and say, has anybody else heard from blah, blah, blah person from blah, blah, blah number? Every single person in my office had heard from the same person, and they were all getting the same answers. So things like that just don't seem to be right, it ultimately can sometimes be a scam. We have to be aware of these things, okay? There's also, you guys have probably heard about the land scam. Some of these have actually closed, where somebody would call Marie and say, hi, Marie, my name is John Smith, and I have vacant land, and I want to list it for sale, and I don't live in the area. I live in Florida. And Marie says, great, I'll be happy to list it for you. And she sends him the documents to sign electronically for the listing, and they get electronically signed. Some of these sales have gotten all the way to closing with monies wired to the fraudulent person because they forged IDs, they forged notary, and it got all the way to closing. And the deed got transferred, and the buyer is legitimate, and the buyer paid. So, this is definitely something to be aware of. Always engage with the attorney. One of the first things I say to sellers out of the area is, who's going to be the attorney representing you, so that I can make contact with them and let them know, and engage the services of the attorney. In the cases that actually closed, attorneys were used. They used legitimate attorneys. They forged their IDs and they forged the notary. And it was all mail away closings. Crazy, right? So the National Association of Realtors has safety resources for us. It's just 3:00 and I hate to go over, but I have like 2 more slides to share with you guys. Safety is a special tab on nar.realtor. You can take the safety pledge. They'll send you a pin. It gives you some tips and tricks. They send you monthly emails with the newest scams and just ways to protect yourself. And before I let you guys go, you have to do a poll at the end, so nobody leave yet. But before you do that, somebody either unmute yourself or put in the chat something you were reminded of today or an action step you're going to take as a result of our time together this afternoon.
I'm going to get that taser flashlight.
I love my taser flashlight, and it's a great flashlight too. It really works well. And all you have to do is slide this and you're good.
I'm going to get that as well. And I like your little one.
The little one is good too. If if you're going to if it
For your
doesn't make
purse.
sense to have a flashlight, this is good for your pocket.
Yeah, yeah.
Good
I'm
tools.
gonna do the same as, sorry.
Go ahead. You're good, Jennifer. Go ahead.
As silly as it is, I get kind of like, I feel embarrassed to carry pepper spray because I like don't want to offend anybody, but with the flashlight, it just looks like a flashlight. So
Exactly.
I feel less like offensive about it.
I feel less offensive about it. And the other thing I found when I carried pepper spray was like, if I was meeting someone for the first time, I would carry it, but then the next time I wouldn't. And then I thought, well, that's stupid, because what if there's somebody in the house that's not my buyer that's going to threaten me, and you're not prepared. So the flashlight is
Right.
good because it serves a purpose as a flashlight. So seems like that's everybody's favorite, putting that flashlight on my Christmas list. Yep. Love all of the open house tips. If you guys are doing open houses, buddy system, buddy system, buddy system. No more open houses at all. Perfect. I'm even on board with that. I hate open houses. And in my area, it works because nobody does them. I understand that we're competitors. So if you go into a listing appointment and you say, yeah, I'm not doing an open house, you don't want to lose the listing over, something that needs to be explained to the seller. But when I explain it, like, we don't necessarily want every member of the public unvetted coming through, or maybe the sellers want that that openness. Okay, well, then we're going to do the steps, and we're going to do it accompanied showings, and we're going to do the sign in, we're going to do the ID and all these things. Talk to my sellers about the pictures. Yep, absolutely. So thank you guys. Make sure you take the poll, make sure that you sign out, and if you want my email, it's right there. I'll be happy to send you the slides. The flashlight is the Taser Strike Light